What is relapse prevention? This refers to a skill set that people learn generally in recovery, in rehabs, to avoid going back to their old ways. Relapse is very common. It's a huge part of recovery for many people. They need a few goes to learn to finally change their ways. I don't recommend this for anybody, but people are generally very sick when they're going through withdrawal, and they just simply want to feel better. And this instinct is very, very powerful. And it's more important to look at people from this compassionate standpoint rather than looking at them as having a moral weakness or a character flaw. It's not fair. These are ill people. So with relapse prevention, it's a skill set, if you will. It can be akin to a toolbox. Certain things are helpful, but it starts with recognizing what are the stressors, what are the things that contribute to cravings, identifying what they are for that particular person, and then going through their mind of how they're going to deal with this issue. So, for example, coping with emotions, both positive and negative emotions. Feeling good about things, wanting to celebrate, that can be a cue or a trigger for some people. Going through depression, anxiety, changes in lifestyle, which happens with recovery, that is stressful for people. And then add on to that all the stresses that exist just in our normal everyday life. So learning how to better cope with our stresses is really important. So that is on its own a separate discussion, but the main point is to identify what are the stressors in my life and learn how to tackle them. Learn how not to get stressed out as the best I can to the best of my abilities. The next part is to identify other high-risk situations, things like weddings, celebrations. These are what are also known as slippery things, slippery people and places as well. So slippery means people can have a slip if they hang out with the same old crowd, for example. So avoiding people who are triggers, who are using, is very important. Avoiding going to places where a person knows that there's going to be using there. For example, an alcoholic should not be going to a bar. So that would be considered a slippery place. So avoiding these situations and planning ahead. If it's a wedding, to plan ahead what you're going to do. For example, for somebody who's got alcohol issues, to bring with them Gatorades or juices or drink a soda that looks like alcohol. They can also learn certain tricks. If somebody asks them why is it they're not drinking, and saying that they have developed an allergy is a great one I've heard. Or carrying around a glass of soda or pop with ice in it, so it looks like a drink, and you don't have to tell people that it doesn't contain alcohol. It's none of their business. So that's little things that people can do to avoid it, and avoiding the confrontation and the discomfort that can occur in such situations where it's socially acceptable to drink. Other things, the main one for me, the most important part of relapse prevention is learning how to deal with my cravings. They happen all the time in the beginning, and fortunately they become less frequent and less intense over time. And I've become a master of this. It's always a work in progress, but the main thing is I don't allow myself to think too much about what it is. Sometimes they come out of nowhere, a craving. Sometimes there's a trigger, of stress in my environment, but a lot of times it's just the most mundane, benign thing can lead to thinking about my drug of choice. And the key is to not fester, not let myself continue thinking along this path, because what starts off as a small trigger can grow and grow. And if I was to entertain this and start fantasizing about it and planning things ahead, then that is very dangerous and imminent sign of relapse. So identifying things that make me that are my triggers, learning how to be aware, like cognitive therapy, aware of my own thinking and identifying what that trigger is, and then writing it out. Most cravings last approximately a minute, so if I can just wait it out, give it some time, think about other things, then most of the time I can get through it. And I've been successful for over 3.5 years. So once a person develops this tool and uses it so many times because of all the cravings that I have, I've become a very effective user of these tools. And finally, part of relapse prevention is communication, to be connected with other people. Addiction is an illness of isolation, whereas recovery is all about being connected with others, where I can express myself, where I'm laughing with others, I'm crying with others, but having a connection with other people, family, friends, 12-step meetings, aftercare groups, at work, it doesn't matter, but human beings, we're not meant to be isolated. It's not in our natures. We are social animals, and it's important to be involved in the community. I do this through my self-help groups, but I also volunteer. Working helps, but balancing work with recreation, and that's another thing. To close this one out with is that balancing life, the stresses in life with recreation. These are things that kind of went by the wayside during my addiction, but in my recovery, I've gotten back into my old ways, things like any sort of recreation, music, sports, but again, it's usually involvement with an activity and involvement with other people. So to summarize, relapse prevention is about developing a skill set, a toolbox, if you will, of the necessary skills to cope with stresses, to identify what those stresses and triggers are, to learn how to ride it out, to learn techniques of not engaging in romanticizing about my use, so that I don't plan a relapse, stop it in its tracks. Fortunately, the triggers and cravings do get better with time. I feel it less often, and it becomes less intense, and it lasts a shorter period of time. Finally, being involved with others around me, being connected to others, and recreation all help to serve me have an enduring and healthy recovery. If you have any comments, then please leave it in the comment box below.